I was 14, young enough to be naive, old enough to crave independence. Walmart sat just a 15-minute walk from my home, a fluorescent refuge where my allowance could stretch just far enough for a pair of jeans or a simple tee, the mall attached. To it had seen better days, empty storefronts, flickering lights, but Walmart remained, breathing its artificial light into the quiet night. Sometimes I'd go with my friend Emily, other times, like that night, I went alone. It was a crisp winter evening. Early December, and the streets shimmered with faint reflections of holiday lights. I slid in my AirPods and let the world slip into background noise. Music made me feel safe, like I was in control. Headphones on meant, leave me alone. At least, that's what most people understood. Walmart was nearly empty, the aisles wide and echoing with overhead announcements. I wandered into the girls' clothing section, brushing my fingers along fabric and checking sizes. That's when I noticed him. A man, maybe 50, stood next to me, his mouth moving, saying something I couldn't hear. I paused the music and pulled one earbud out. "Are you talking to me?" I asked, blinking. He smiled. "Yeah? Sorry, didn't see your headphones." Sure he didn't. The man had short gray hair, glasses perched on a sharp nose, and a disturbingly smooth, clean-shaven face. He stood uncomfortably close for someone I hadn't invited into my space. He pointed at my jeans with a casual smirk. "My daughter buys the same kind," he said, as if that were some kind of opening line. I let out a polite chuckle, more out of social conditioning than amusement. "Oh, that's funny," I replied, hoping that'd be the end of it. It should have been, but he took my smile and ran with it, interpreting it as a welcome mat instead of a boundary. As I continued browsing, he lingered. "Too long, too close." "How old are you?" he asked. I hesitated. 14. His response was a breath too warm, a second too slow. 14? That's a great age, so mature, but still so young. That sentence was a knife wrapped in silk. My stomach knotted. I tried to turn away to busy myself with the tops on the rack, but he kept talking. "What's your name?" I don't know why. I gave him my real name. Maybe because I was raised to be polite, maybe because I didn't want to escalate things, but when I told him, his eyes lit up. "That's my favorite name for a girl," he said softly. That's when the air changed. His next question sealed it. "What school do you go to?" A shiver passed through me. This was no harmless conversation. This was someone reaching, pulling, digging. I didn't care how polite I'd been raised to be. Every instinct in me screamed to shut it down. I lied. "Oh, I'm not from around here," I said quickly. "Just visiting my cousin," but he didn't let go. "Where are you from then?" He pressed his voice, oily and casual. "Out of state," I answered vaguely, avoiding eye contact. But then came the words that chilled me to the bone. "I've seen you around here before. Are you sure you're not from around here?" I froze. My mind raced. How long had he been watching me? Had I seen him before and never noticed? I didn't. Reply I couldn't. I just turned around and walked away, blood pounding in my ears. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely afraid of a stranger. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, as if he already knew more about me than I'd ever shared. I clutched the jeans I had planned to buy and made my way quickly to the registers. I didn't look back. I just wanted to get out. But the night wasn't finished with me yet. After paying, I drifted into the mall connected to Walmart, hoping to shake off the encounter. The air was filled with the artificial scent of pine and cinnamon. Christmas decorations sparkled from every corner. Garlands wound around railings, oversized ornaments dangled from the ceiling, and an animatronic. Santa waved stiffly from a sleigh no one cared about anymore. The nostalgia was bittersweet, but I needed the distraction. I wandered aimlessly, pretending to browse, hoping my nerves would settle. I stepped into Victoria's Secret, mostly out of curiosity, half expecting to feel safe among pink walls and plush displays. But as I peeked through the glass storefront, my heart stuttered. There he was, sitting on a bench outside the store. His hands were clasped, his head slightly tilted, watching. I darted out. My legs suddenly heavy. I walked fast enough to look urgent, not fast enough to seem panicked. I weaved through the mall, past shuttered stores and the occasional couple, until a horrible realization made me glance back. He was following me. His footsteps weren't loud, but they were relentless. I could feel them shadowing mine. Panic surged through me. My hand fumbled for my phone. I called the only person who could calm me down, who could do something. "Mom, I'm being followed." My mother's voice, though calm, held an undercurrent of panic. She told me to stay in a public place, somewhere well-lit, somewhere with people, somewhere safe. I ducked into a store bright, crowded enough, the kind with trinkets and too-loud music. The man didn't follow me in, not fully, but he came to the threshold, standing there like some grotesque statue. He looked directly at me, and then he whispered my name. Not loudly, not enough to draw attention, just loud enough to curl into my ears and settle into my bones. He said it like he owned it, like he'd been saying it in his mind for days. I felt nauseous. I walked straight to the cashier. A girl only a few years older than me. My voice cracked. That man is following me. I don't know. Him. Her eyes widened and she nodded quickly. She came out from behind the counter a couple nearby had overheard. They approached and offered to wait with me. I felt a strange surge of gratitude and humiliation at once, like I was both saved and exposed. The man, sensing the shift in the air, turned and melted into the crowd, swallowed by them all, but his presence lingered like smoke. My name still echoed soft and terrifying. My mom arrived minutes later, her face pale and tight with worry. I ran to her like a child, all 14 years of me crumbling into her embrace. We thanked the couple who'd waited with me, and as we walked back through the mall, me mom's arm protectively wrapped around me. I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see him again. I never did, but the fear stayed. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to return to that Walmart. I avoided the mall entirely. Even with friends, I felt a constant prickling on the back of my neck as if eyes were always watching. I began to carry pepper spray. I learned how to fake phone calls. I stopped giving strangers my name. I stopped giving them anything. Something had shifted that night, not just in how I saw strangers, but in how I saw myself. My bubble of childhood safety had popped, and in its place was a sharpened sense of the world's shadows. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't listened to my gut, if I hadn't walked away, if I hadn't made that call. But I do know this. Even in brightly lit places filled with laughter and holiday cheer, monsters don't hide under beds. They sit on benches and whisper your name. Walmart was never supposed to be part of my story, just a pit stop, a paycheck, a way to keep the lights on in my apartment at 24. The fluorescent lights, the dull chatter of customers, the corporate smell of plastic and cleaning products, all blended into the background noise of a life stretched too thin. I clocked in, I smiled when I had to, and I counted the minutes until I could leave. The customers were demanding the coworkers cold, and every shift left me more depleted than the last. That day, I was working as a general associate, roaming the endless aisles, folding clothes, straightening shelves, answering the same questions with forced cheer. Just another forgettable shift, until I felt a light tap on my back. I turned and time stopped. It was her, Casey. Her smile stretched too wide, her arms opened too quickly. She looked happy to see me. I wasn't. I hadn't seen Casey in months, not since I ended our relationship, and blocked her from every platform I could. The breakup hadn't been clean. It hadn't been peaceful. She'd left voicemails crying, long messages begging, accusing, pleading. She'd been possessive, volatile, unpredictable. There was no part of me that missed her, and yet here she was, standing in my place of work, like we'd bumped into each other at a coffee shop. "I heard from a mutual friend that you work here," she said, with a grin, eyes shining with something far more intense than nostalgia. But there was no mutual friend I knew that I felt. And my friends had all cut ties with her just as I had. Her presence here wasn't coincidence, it was intentional. I could see it in her eyes, behind the practiced warmth of her voice. At first I kept it civil. I hugged her back, smiled, said, "What a surprise," even though my skin crawled with every second. But something inside me was already bracing. Her voice wavered as she slipped into confrontation. "It's really messed up that you blocked me like that," she said. The smile was gone. "This," I said slowly, "is exactly why I blocked you." Her mood flipped like a switch. "You can't just erase people," she snapped, her tone low but intense. "We had something real." I kept my distance, standing tall but calm, trying to maintain control. "Casey," I said, "showing up to my job tracking me down is not normal." She brushed off the accusation, pretending innocence. I pressed harder. "Who told you I worked here?" "That's not important," she said, eyes narrowing. But it was everything. There was no one left in our shared circles who would have given her that information. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated act of intrusion. I told her I was seeing someone new, hoping that would make her leave. It didn't. I asked her, calmly, firmly, not to contact me again. She refused to move. She stood her ground, staring at me like she owned the space around me. So I walked away. I headed straight to the employee-only area without looking back. She didn't follow me, but her presence lingered like a shadow behind my every step. That night, for the first time, I seriously considered filing a restraining order. I had no idea how close I was to needing one. My shift ended around 11 p.m. and the cold outside crept into my bones as I stepped into the silence of night. The parking lot was half empty, dimly lit. My roommate Paul's car was already in the driveway when I got home. Everything felt ordinary. I dropped my keys on the counter, tossed my uniform in a pile, and started heating up a frozen meal. This was my ritual: video games and cheap food before collapsing into sleep. I sank into the couch, controller in hand, trying to unwind. About an hour passed before I headed to bed. But just as sleep began to take hold, I heard something, a sound, a shift in the air. I blinked my eyes, adjusting to the dark. My bedroom door was open. I never leave it open. I sat up slowly. My heart thudded. Paul wouldn't open my door. He's the early-to-bed type. I tiptoed into the hallway. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I checked the front door, unlocked. My blood ran cold. Paul's car was still outside. I knocked on his door. No response. His room was locked. Something was wrong. Deeply, horribly wrong. Then I remembered. The spare key we kept outside, I ran to check. It was gone. The cold outside didn't sting as much as the realization did. The key was gone. The one hidden beneath the flower pot. My little security fallback, shared only with family and Casey. Only Casey. I checked again and again. Desperation clawed at logic. Maybe it got kicked. Maybe it was misplaced, but I knew it hadn't. I stumbled back inside, lungs tightening. My hands trembled as I walked straight to the kitchen, and then I saw it. The knife block. One was missing. The largest one. My heart lurched into overdrive. My phone was still in my bedroom. If she was inside, if she had that knife. I had seconds to act. I moved like lightning, heart pounding in my throat. I sprinted to my bedroom door, grabbed the handle and slammed it shut from the outside. I threw my entire weight against it and screamed, "Paul!" Footsteps, a thud, then her voice. "I'm sorry. Let's talk." Her voice, Casey. She was on the other side, trying the doorknob, jiggling it, pulling, crying. Paul finally erupted from his room, dazed and panicked. I yelled at him to call the police. Casey kept sobbing behind the door, whispering then screaming. Her desperation filled every corner of the apartment like smoke, but I wouldn't let go. Not this time. The moments stretched into eternities. I held the door shut with everything I had, muscles burning, every nerve in my body focused on that doorknob. Casey sobbed, begged, her voice slid between fragile and furious. Frantic apologies, followed by bitter accusations. Behind that door was the knife, the woman I once loved, and the terrifying truth that love had long since rotted into obsession. Sirens. Finally, the pounding on the door stopped. Her voice faded into sobs. When the officers came inside, they ordered her to step back. I heard them instruct her to drop the knife before they opened the door and pulled her out. I stood frozen as they escorted her away. She didn't look back. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were empty, like someone whose world had caved in and who still thought they had a right to be there. She was arrested on the spot. I didn't have to press charges. The state took over burglary in the 2nd degree. She's serving time now. A long stretch, I sometimes wonder why it wasn't attempted murder. I try not to wonder what would have happened if I'd been asleep just 10 minutes longer. I'll be gone before she's free. A different city, a different life. But one thing haunts me more than anything. The red flags were always there, I just didn't want to see them. There was a time in my life when the nights never slept, and neither did I. I worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour Walmart supercenter, concrete colossus illuminated in perpetual fluorescence where time blurred into a never-ending hum of price. Scanners and the distant squeak of shopping carts. I clocked in at 10 p.m., bleary-eyed and aching from my day shift and the chaotic rhythm of single motherhood. My son needed me for drop-offs and pickups, and bills didn't pay themselves, so I became a ghost in the night, sleeping when I could, surviving on fumes, juggling 2 jobs and trying not to unravel at the seams. That night it was biting cold outside, the kind that stung your skin and made you long for the warmth of a home you barely got. To see the store was still bustling with late-night wanderers, insomniacs, last-minute shoppers, and oddball regulars. But like always, as the hours ticked past midnight, the noise tapered off until only the occasional creak of a cart echoed through the aisles. It was in this lull beneath flickering lights and towering shelves that something changed, something I'll never forget. I was restocking boxes in the cereal aisle, just me, a cart full of cardboard, and the comforting clatter of boxes meeting shelves. That's when I first noticed him. A man drifted past the end of the aisle, then hesitated, reversing his steps until he stood just barely in view. He didn't move at first. He just watched me. His eyes met mine, blank, unreadable. Then without a word, he pretended to scan the granola bars. His hair was curly and unkempt. I couldn't place his ethnicity, but his skin was light brown. He wore a black backpack that bulged unnaturally, as if it were straining under the weight of something ominous. The pack looked like it hadn't been opened in days, or maybe it had far too many times. He lingered a minute longer, then shuffled closer and asked in a low, awkward tone where the bread was. I pointed to the back of the store. He muttered thanks, and waddled off, his walk exaggerated, strange, almost as if something was wrong with his legs. I tried to dismiss the discomfort creeping up my spine. After all, weirdos came with the night shift, but something about him stuck. I stayed in that cereal aisle longer than I meant to, stacking and rotating boxes trying to shake off the unease. But it wasn't long before I noticed him again. Not directly. At first, it was just a shadow, a glance. Every few minutes, like clockwork, he would pass by the end of the aisle, always alone, always empty-handed. His backpack still stuffed, his eyes always drifting toward me. He wasn't shopping, he wasn't browsing, he was circling. My heart started tapping a steady rhythm of warning. I moved faster, my hands fumbling, with boxes, my breath catching. I finished that aisle and wheeled the empty cart to the back warehouse as casually as I could. I grabbed a new UBO cart, intentionally choosing a section on the far opposite end of the store. Chips and snacks, bright colors, safe distractions. 45 minutes had passed. Surely he had left. But then, there he was, again, standing silently at the edge of the chip aisle like a predator who'd tracked its prey. His hands were still empty. That cursed backpack was still with him, and his eyes, they locked onto me with the same sick fascination. He approached. My stomach knotted as he made his slow, deliberate way down the aisle toward me. I pretended not to notice, praying he would turn away. But then he spoke, his voice, low, shaky, laced with misplaced confidence. He told me he'd been watching me, that he couldn't resist coming over to say how beautiful I was. There was something in his tone, something oily, something wrong. I forced a tight smile, heart pounding. That's very sweet, but I'm working, I said, voice thin and polite. I hoped he would leave, but he didn't. He pressed further, asking questions. Where was I from? Did I live nearby? I lied about everything, my name, my neighborhood, even my accent. I wanted to vanish, to crawl out of my skin and run. His breath reeked of something sour, something foul that clung to the air between us. Then came the ask. My number. I'm seeing someone, I said quickly. He chuckled. There's no harm in friends, he replied, as if the word friend meant anything when spoken with that leer. I panicked. I gave him a fake number, something I used to give creeps back in high school. It felt like surrender. He smiled, smug, like he'd won. Then he tossed a half-hearted compliment over his shoulder and walked away. I exhaled, thinking that was the end of it. It wasn't. Hours passed like molasses in winter. I kept my head down, focusing on my work, but my mind was stuck on that man. His stare, his questions. That backpack, I should have reported him to the night manager. I should have called someone, but part of me hoped he'd just leave. Then the walkie-talkie crackled. The only other overnight stalkerone of the few souls I trusted on those shifts radioed. In her voice, tight with concern, "Hey, there's a guy asking for you up front, creepy looking. Said he's looking for the pretty one in chips." My blood turned to ice. I froze, barely able to get the words out. Tell him I left. And I ran. I made a beeline to the employee lounge, the only place he shouldn't be able to follow. I planned to stay there until morning, tucked into a cheap padded chair, pretending the world outside didn't exist. But the world didn't stay outside. The double doors burst open. He was there, and he looked furious. "You gave me a fake number," he shouted, eyes wild, voice echoing off the sterile break room walls. My body stiffened. Fight or flight pulsed through me like a live wire. "You can't." "Be back here, sir," I said, voice cracking. But he wasn't listening. He threw his backpack onto the table beside me with a loud thud, the sound of something heavy. He unzipped it slowly, all while locking eyes with me, daring me to watch. Something in me snapped. I didn't wait to see what was inside that bag. Whatever it was, whatever madness or malice he carried, I wasn't going to find out. I shot to my feet, knocking over the flimsy chair behind me. As I bolted past him, he lunged his hand, grazing my arm, cold and rough. But adrenaline carried me faster. I twisted away his fingers, slipping like oil through water. I tore through the backroom doors, heart hammering, breath ragged. My feet pounded against the linoleum floor as I sprinted. Through the silent store, the aisles blurred. Fluorescent lights buzzed above like angry wasps. I didn't dare look back, but I heard him running, shouting something I couldn't make out. His voice warped and distant. I burst through the automatic doors and into the icy night. My car sat alone in the lot, dark and waiting, keys already clenched in my shaking hand. I fumbled with the lock, praying it would open fast enough. It did. I threw myself inside and slammed the door. Locked it. He emerged from the store moments later, scanning the lot like a wolf who'd lost the scent. He spotted my car, started toward it, but I was already in motion, engine roaring to life, tires crunching over gravel and ice. He couldn't catch me. Not now. Not ever. I didn't stop driving until the store was a blur in the rearview mirror. I pulled over a few blocks away, hands trembling as I finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding for what felt like hours. I called the night manager, voice shaky, and told him everything about the man, the stalking, the break room, the backpack. He didn't get it. He told me I couldn't leave the store short-staffed, that he'd call the police just to be safe and check the footage. But I wasn't coming back. Not that night. Not ever if it were up to me. He didn't argue long. Maybe something in my voice made him realize how real it had been. He eventually relented, said he'd handle it, and told me to return the next night. I hung up and sat in silence, staring. into the void of the dashboard. My thoughts spiraled. What was in that backpack? A weapon? A trap? A trophy meant for someone he never should have had access to? I didn't want to know. I still don't. The next night I returned, because that's what survival looked like for me back then. Waking up, clocking in, and pretending the monsters at night weren't real. My manager claimed the police had been contacted, that the footage had been handed over. I never saw a report. No one ever followed up, but the memory followed me, haunted me. Every aisle I stalked afterward felt like a trap waiting to spring. Every shadow looked like him. Every squeaky wheel on a cart made my skin crawl. To this day, I can still hear the echo of his footsteps, soft and stalking between the rows of cereal and chips. The chill of that night never quite left my bones. It wasn't just fear I carried home with me. It was violation, betrayal, and the aching realization that even beneath the bright lights of a supercenter, darkness can thrive. I worked with all kinds of characters in that job. Drifters, outsiders, lonely night wanderers who found comfort in aisles of bulk goods and midnight silence. But he was different, predatory, intentional, dangerous. I often think about what he was reaching for in that bag. Not because I want to know, God, no, but because part of me is always bracing for the worst. What if I hadn't run? What if he'd grabbed me harder? What if the manager had brushed it off even more than he already did? No one prepares you for moments like that. There's no training video for surviving a stalker in the cereal aisle. You just act, survive, endure. And yet that night changed me. I no longer ignore the feeling in my gut when someone seems off. I no longer apologize for disappearing into the break room or calling things out as they are. Fear taught me vigilance, and pain taught me to fight. The world sees night workers as shadows, invisible people in vests and name tags. But behind every restocked shelf is someone pushing through exhaustion, through struggle, through danger, just to make it to the next shift, to make it home. And sometimes surviving the night is the bravest thing we ever do. That was another true story. But in the world of horror, truth is often stranger than fiction. If you're still watching, you're one of the brave ones. Most don't make it this far. Before you go, check behind you. Not everything that follows you makes a sound. Subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell, because the next horror stories drop soon. And remember, the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. Stay scared. Stay safe. We'll see you in the dark.